AnteoTech has R&D facilities located in MI Plains, Brisbane Technology Park, which featuring the life science and the battery laboratories. And we do have manufacturing facilities also located in the same place. Majority is for life sciences. Currently, we are the market leaders in providing reagents, nano reagents, to the IVD companies and suppliers, and also life science sectors. And related to today's topic about the bioconjugation to the Luminex beads, as we know in the industry, we do have some bioconjugation, potential bioconjugation issues we may encounter when we try to develop certain assays. So as we know, the Luminex beads, Luminex system is based on the Microsphere, and the conjugation of proteins to certain microspheres sometimes can be quite difficult, especially utilizing some conventional methods, EDC, NHS chemistry. For example, like some viral particles, it will be quite difficult to conjugate if it's been inactivated by certain inactivation procedures. And also some recombinant proteins and native antigens, if they are unable to be conjugated to the microsphere, they may lose their activities, or they are unable to be conjugated successfully to retain their activities. Also, some antibodies, they may not be able to conjugate so easily, or antibody fragments. And also some polymers people are interested in different kinds of screening or downstream applications. So majority of the time, maybe using the conventional chemistry, this EDEC chemistry and NHS, will be able to conjugate all these macromolecules to the microspheres successfully. But from time to time, we do have some challenging proteins or difficult proteins or macromolecules. And the consequences of unable to conjugate all these macromolecules successfully will cause a poor reproducibility of the assay, or the activities of the these macromolecules cannot be retained, and the assay cannot be developed successfully. So we may observe some a poor batch-to-batch reproducibility in our assays. We can make some conjugation today, and the next day or next several runs wouldn't be able to make it. As we know, the EDC chemistry itself is quite sensitive to moisture, need to be stored -20 degrees. And from time to time, the control of the activity of this chemical, if we don't control it well, it will cause issues. On the other hand, the EDC chemistry, after we activate the microspheres, need to be utilized immediately. It means that if we don't utilize it straight away into the reactions or bioconjugation reactions, it may cause downstream difficulties of conjugating the proteins. So the poor batch-to-batch reproducibility we may observe if we don't control the procedure as well. And because of that, in developing assays for Luminex, for example, like the immunoassays, or some other if it's a sandwich assay, or is the antigen DAN assay, for the assay reproducibility, it cannot be controlled really well. In order to develop an assay successfully, it may take a much longer time, because we don't have a standardized protocol easily can be followed or can screen a lot of different variables and iterations in a short period of time. So the kind of time consuming contribute the high cost of the development. And due to some proteins and some antibodies, they may not agree with EDC NHS chemistry. So in that, during the process, they may lost in activities post the conjugation. So for example, like they may not have enough like amine group to be conjugated to, or their like a structure or their like conformation after like a conjugate by using the conventional covalent chemistry is too rigid, and they lost activities due to the rigidness. So we do have a solution using our like a patented technology called AnteoBind. And this AnteoBind is an alternative. We won't say that this AnteoBind is just a replacement. It's an alternative method of a bioconjugation, which is based on the technology utilizing the metal ion polymers bioconjugation solution, and providing it as like another new tool in your toolbox. When we are encountering some challenging or difficult proteins with the like conjugate to the microspheres, you may consider using like an AnteoBind as a conjugation methods. So what is AnteoBind? AnteoBind for life science application is a metal ion polymers, is complex. This new alternative actually is aqueous based the kind of nanobinders can modify the surface very easily. So for example, like you have a carboxylic acid particle surface like a microsphere, and on the microsphere it carries the carboxylic acid. And because AnteoBind is the metal ion which carries a lot of positive charge polymers complex, and will be able to like bind to the like carboxylic acid very easily. And after binding onto it, it covers the carboxylic acid and form the AnteoBind surface, which is positive charged. Then on the surface, these metal ions has a lot of like arms will be able to form the multi-point coordination binding with your selected proteins or antibodies. So this AnteoBind, after activated on the surface, is actually very stable. We have observed it's on the ready-to-use maintain the stability in solution for more than a year. So it means that you can activate a very big batch of your particles and then store away. And when you need it, you can take them out and do some assay developments or check the kind of a batch-to-batch like reproducibility of your conjugation. And the binding is based on the active binding. It's very effective and reproducible. So this multi-point coordination, later I will explain a bit more detail, is a gentle multi-point coordination binding to proteins through dative bonding or chelation or coordination to retain the protein activities. And it's pretty reproducible and very simple to scale up. So here I'd like to explain in more detail utilizing carboxylic acid group as the illustration. So on the microsphere surface, you would have seen the carboxylic acid is like a drawing here, and the surface charge will be negative. And after activated by the AnteoBind, you'll form the AnteoBind layer. And this AnteoBind layer is because it's polymeric metal ions, it carries very strong positive charge. So you will transform the whole surfaces to positive charged particle. And there are like bonds of these metal ions, which is ready to bind to the antibodies or proteins. So if on the surface of antibodies or protein, this enlarged like a section, there's a carboxylic acids on the amino acid residues, you will be able to form the dative bonding between the amino acid residues and the metal ion center. And in doing so, will very gently bind to the like antibodies or proteins through this multi-point like kind of a coordination through carboxylic acid and the amino acid residues, or you have other amino acid residues carry, for example, like the amine group or other histidine group, will be able to form chelation or coordination with the metal ions, and also can provide a kind of binding points. So this allows the antibodies or proteins after binding to the AnteoBind surfaces retain the kind of activities. And usually for the antibody, we found the FC region is preferably bind to the surface of AnteoBind. So above is a quick illustration of the carboxylic acid group binding to the AnteoBind surface. So based on the technology of AnteoBind, we have developed a kit for the users, end users, to be easily develop their assays. So in the kit, we have three major components. This activation kit multiplex microsphere is developed specifically for Luminex microspheres. So it's compatible with all carboxylated Luminex microspheres, for example, like MacPlex. It comes in the package of 10 reactions, 40 reactions, and 400 reactions. And each reaction, it means that it can activate 1.25 millions of microspheres for the assay. And it also comes with a conjugation buffer. And this conjugation buffer is a generic buffer utilizing in the covalent chemistry. And the pH is set at pH 6. And also comes in as a storage buffer, is a saline based. So it's a very, very simple kit which has 3 components, and for activation of a Luminex microspheres, for bioconjugation, and also for wash into the storage. So the workflow of this kit, so as we mentioned, you have a bare carboxylic acid particles, then you have AnteoBind, the kind of activation. The activation takes about 1 hour at room temperature. And after the particle has been activated, it stays activated in the AnteoBind activation solution. So it can be stored for up to a year in solution at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. So after being activated, you can choose to continue to conjugation, or you can store the particles away when it's needed, and you can fetch them out for further experiments. Then you add in antibody to mix with the particles with the gentle a rotation and mixing and agitation at room temperature for another 1 hour. And after that, the antibody is fully conjugated to the AnteoBind surfaces and becomes AnteoBind microsphere conjugates. And of course, there's option of blocking. You can block with for example, a BSA or other blockers of interest. And after being conjugates being prepared, this conjugate can be put into the assay development of Luminex beads-based immunoassays or some other assays. So the advantages of a stable pre-activated microspheres by AnteoBind, it allows you can prepare, for example, the batches of 10 or more that separate the beads regions of interest and can be simultaneously activated and stored. So for example, in your study, you have a 10-plex or 5-plex. You can activate these 5-plex of beads in the different regions of a choice, and then you can set them aside. And when it's required, you can take them out for conjugation. Also, because it's a very simplified system to only utilizing one conjugation buffer, so you can conjugate in your experimental design or checkerboard experiments. You can conjugate 5 or more antibodies to 5 or more bead regions in the kind of combination which is required. It can be done simultaneously in one experiment or 2, which can ease and simplify the feasibility testing and also in our assay developments and speed up our assay development to when we need to screen different kinds of conditions, for example, like antibody loading or the kind of signal out. The virus-like particles can also be proven to be conjugated to the AnteoBind Luminex microspheres there's collaborators and end users in the United States. They have a panel of flavivirus like fusion proteins, virus-like particles, which they would like to develop some multiplex tests. So they're utilizing this multiplex approach by conjugating different kinds of virus-like particles in order to develop the multiplex assay to screen the IgM or IgG antibodies in the population. If we have the streptavidin proteins or protein A, protein G, can be also like a bind to the Luminex microspheres using the AnteoBind. So streptavidin is very widely utilized in developing assays. If we can bind the streptavidin onto the Luminex beads, you can come in with the biotin-related macromolecules for your downstream assay developments. Also, for example, you can also bind protein A or protein G, which can subsequently to raise your antibodies after through the protein A and protein G to have a better presentation of your antibodies in the assay if it is required. And in some tests, there are some antigens or proteins, for example, like serum proteins like BSA or human serum albumin or some other serum proteins or some protein of choice or antigens can be also easily conjugated to the AnteoBind activated Luminex microspheres. Recently, we have customers that actually utilizing the COVID-19 antigens from the virus and conjugated to the Luminex microsphere through AnteoBind Activation Kit and utilize it in their screening of the population for IgG or IgM. Also, a nucleic acid has been demonstrated is also capable to bind to AnteoBind services through this interaction. The nucleic acid single-strand DNA, poly A or poly T, oligos will be able to easily bind to AnteoBind activated services. There are a couple examples here I'd like to demonstrate. So this activation kit, we have some viral particle conjugation. This is a study done by NMI in Germany. So what they did is they used the kit of AnteoBind activation kit to activate the microsphere, and then they have the hepatitis A virus, which is inactivated by formalin. Then they coupled and conjugate directly to the AnteoBind activated services, which has proven to be quite difficult using EDC and NHS to a certain extent. And you can see on the right-hand side, when they're using AnteoBind to activate the microsphere, they can increase the signal output about doubled in the test. At the same time, you can see that they kind of days after vaccination, demonstrating that these vaccination efficacies using AnteoBind services are demonstrating more effective in comparison to conventional methods. Here is another example when we need to migrate the ELISA tests to a microsphere platforms. So they just example is one of the many. So in this the cytokine multiplex test, we have IL-2, interleukin-2, and IL-4, IL-6, and TNF-alpha, and GM-CSF assays. So this antibody actually is not like what we call it, designed for Luminex, like beads or microspheres. We ordered these antibody pairs from a company which utilize actually for ELISAs. And many of, majority of them is using the passive methods find to the ELISA plates. And we order all these like antibodies in different antibody pairs from this company, and we conjugate like one antibody to the microsphere through AnteoBind, and another antibody is biotin-edited, and then later using strep-devitin RPE as the signal output. Then we compare the 5-plex assays we have developed with the commercially available assay from Biorad. And here is the result. So when utilizing the AnteoBind methods, we can see that it's very similar in all the cytokine assays and all these different kinds of the biomarker assays in comparison to the conventional method prepared cytokine kit for Luminex platform. This is demonstrating that when we try to migrate the ELISA assays or those ELISA antibodies to the microsphere based Luminex platform using AnteoBind Activation Kit, we can enjoy and observe here is a pretty straightforward and easy migration. And we have seen different kinds of end users and collaborators or people who licensing in our technologies. They enjoyed similar kinds of easy migration when they need to migrate their ELISA test to microsphere tests. So our technology has been utilized by many companies. One of the companies actually licensing in, it's called eBioscience. A while back is their company name, but now their assay has been widely utilized in the commercial, it's a commercial kits, especially in the cytokine multiplex assays. Another example is talking about the simplicities. We do have that kind of a simplicity that utilizing the kit. When we mention that we can activate the particles and set it aside and stable for a year, here is just one of the many examples to demonstrate the AnteoBind activate the particles is the stability. So we did check the kind of a real-time stability of this AnteoBind activated Luminex beads, and using the sandwich immunoassays as an example, like a TSH in this case. All these beads has been activated and stored at 4 degrees for a year. And some of them has been done earlier, like first week and 4 months. And then there's a first week and 4 months, actually we did a conjugation and put the antibody on and store it aside as well. So the particles are stored for a year and also taken out and conjugate to the a TSH antibody and compare to the conjugate actually done about 1 week and 4 months ago, at 4 months and at 1 week. And the result demonstrated that there was not much differences in the kind of stability of the microsphere has been activated and stable and stored in the at 2 to 8 degrees for a year. This also been demonstrated like a lot of conjugates of using AnteoBind surfaces can be stored in the commercial kits. So those are commercial kits usually claim more than 12 months, the kind of stabilities. And our technology actually is endorsed the technology. Luminex has been some collaboration with us, and one of their blog actually talking about our technology as alternative for coupling the problematic proteins onto the Luminex platforms Luminex beads. And this webinar is also like promoted with like a Luminex for this purpose. So I think it's a alternative technology. What we'd like to position ourselves is in offering to the end users a like alternative, like a tool of bioconjugation in our toolbox. So when we are conjugating, for example, like antibodies or antigens to the like microsphere, if we encounter any difficulties utilizing the EDEC chemistry or some other methodologies, our technology, I believe, will have that kind of sometimes will be quite helpful in like handling those difficult and challenging proteins or macromolecules. And also, we have like a contract conjugation services and assay development services are provided by AnteoTech, which is like we not only just like manufacturing and selling the like conjugation activation kit, but also we provide the contract services for the end users and customers. If they have any like difficulties in or issues in like conjugating the proteins or antibodies to the microspheres. So we will use the AnteoBind technology and to provide the assay reproducibilities for challenging proteins and antibodies. We'll go through like a screen process using standard methods or some internal know-how to further improve during the conjugation. And for some cases, we observe that it can save time and cost because we have done this many, many times for our customers. And the work also will be conducted under our current design control process. When we are using the AnteoBind activation kit for the multiplex microsphere for Luminex system, for optimal the protein conjugation, we recommend the buffer at the pH 6 as it already included in the kit. But some proteins, for example, like some virus-like particles we mentioned previously from the flaviviruses or some other proteins or antibodies, they may not be stable at pH 6. Then higher pH conjugation buffer can be utilized. For example, like the herpes buffer at pH 7 or a bit higher could be utilized as a conjugation buffer instead of the buffer included in the kit. And when we're considering that during the conjugation, we need to avoid for example, some surfactants like a twin 20 and in the presence of the metal chelators. As we know, the AnteoBind surface is like a metal ions. So any metal chelators, for example, like EDTA or high concentration of phosphate buffer, which we need to avoid during the conjugation, as it can interfere the protein or antibody binding to the AnteoBind surface. Also, during storage, as we know, the antibodies or proteins, each antibody proteins are a little bit different. So we need to have maybe a dedicated or some specific a storage buffer and compositions for those antibodies or proteins. And we don't recommend to utilize a phosphate buffer as a storage buffer because the phosphate contains some metal chelating capabilities. But the PBS buffer can be utilized in the assays with no issues at all. So recommend for the storage buffer, we use like a herpes buffer or tris buffer as alternative, or just using the storage buffer included in the kit if it fit for the purpose. For the blocking the after conjugation, we have tested the BSA or some other alternative like proteins or different proteins, or if some assay or some, because due to the microsphere like kind of characteristics, in some situation actually doesn't require like a blocking. The blocking doesn't really like make too much differences. Then you can bypass the blocking step. But if it needs like blocking, you need to further optimize the concentration or need of the like macromolecules for blocking purpose. So a quick summary of today's like webinar presentation. The AnteoBind Activation Kit from Anteo, which we can see is simple and easy to use for the end users when they're developing the Microsphere based Luminex assays. It enables the researchers to easily develop multiplex immunoassays. We have demonstrated the kind of 5-plex, but actually there are more. Some from commercial companies, they already developed using the AnteoBind kit under like Luminex system, and is easy migration from ELISA systems to Microsphere Luminex system by using the AnteoBind kit. The activated Luminex Microsphere by AnteoBind are stable for a year. So there's been like demonstrated like an advantage for a lot of companies who are doing a lot of screening purpose. So they can set aside a very big batch of activated beads. Then within their 1 year time, they can always access them to have a reproducible like a conjugation in order to keep the kind of batch-to-batch reproducibility for the conjugation. So they can utilize it in the high throughput screening. For example, screening certain antibodies or certain antigens interactions, or the assay automation because the particle can be pre-activated and set aside, so they can easily plug into the system for automated conjugation and downstream the assay screening purpose. In AnteoTech, we provide the contract services. If any like end users or customers interested in conjugating some of their like proteins or macromolecules, or some challenging proteins or polymers or antibodies to the Luminex microspheres, we are more than happy to have a discussion and to provide our service.